Hello, I'm MaryCatherine. I am the owner of Cozy Crooked Cottage, and I am happy to talk to you today about the music soap series. So today we are jumping into the first of the music soap series, which are based on the Western classical music compositional styles. And so today is medieval. And the medieval compositional time period is usually referred to music from between 1150 and 1400 AD. Yes, music was composed before 1150. But the reason that we kind of lock into that as a compositional time period is because that is when music really started to be notated, when it started to be annotated and written down, and that is what has shaped Western classical music to the music that we know it now. So even though music absolutely existed before that time period, this is when it started to become what it is. And so we're going to jump into medieval music. So what's neat about medieval music is that at the time, most of it was driven by the church. So most of the texts were sacred or liturgical texts, and they were very often one vocal line, which is called monophony, or monophonic, meaning one single unaccompanied melodic line. And if you think of that, if you've ever heard of something called Gregorian chant, which is known to be sung by monks, that is where they would sing a text and they would chant a text. Even if it was a whole group of people, it would be one melody, everybody chanting the same melody, monophony, single vocal line. However, throughout this medieval time period, because of course it encompassed a large time period, there began to be the development of polyphony, which was multiple independent vocal lines. So don't get it confused with what we think of as vocal lines today, which is a lot of harmony and everything works together on purpose. It isn't that. It was independent vocal lines all going together. So it kind of is the idea and the introduction of harmony, but not harmony as we understand it now in 2021. And so what is neat about that is that there often would be an organum or a held pitch, and then the line would go above it. Or there would be these independent melodic lines moving independently, apologize for the repeat, independently of each other. And so the texture could be very intense and very rich. Hildegard von Bingen is very, very well known for this time period. She was towards the earlier part of the medieval times, but she was a huge proponent in music and in science and in history and everything, which is massive to think of. And so you'll hear that in some of the music, but the vocal lines weave in and weave out with the text. Also important to know is there were instruments, and instrumental music was starting to make an approach and to become part of music. And so you had the flute, you had the recorder, you had stringed instruments like the lute, and you had instruments that were beginning to add texture. You also had instruments that were just solo instruments, which is important as we continue to move through time into the next period, which we're not going to talk about today. So, but what is funny to think is, I don't know about you, but when I think medieval, when I think 1150 to 1400, the last thing I think is soap, right? There's a little sense of irony there where it's like medieval soap. I usually think stinky, or uncouth or something to that effect. And so when I was putting these soaps together, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what would the medieval time period smell like? What would be a trait for the medieval time period, because I don't think of cleanliness or soap when it comes to this time period. And I realized how incredibly wrong I was. Look at the advancements that they are making. They are notating music, and they don't have any of the tools that we have. They are making these huge advancements in melody and in harmony and starting to understand tones and modes. No, they don't have scales yet or anything that we take for granted, but they are pioneering these concepts that we have now based Western music on for centuries. And so as I started to think about that, I wanted to really kind of connect into something that was rough, really raw, but also had this elegance and this beauty and this shimmer to it. So this is what we came up with. This is the medieval soap, and it is a dark blue. I blended in some activated charcoal with the color to get this rich, just really beautiful essence of blue, of knowledge, of connection. So we have this blue, but then it's not perfect. If you look, there are just spots, and there are places where it is just rough and hewn and gouged out. But when you look closer, in those spots is gold. And so all the way through, we're weaving this gold. We're weaving this texture, this fine line of intricacy of what could be, of what is going to happen, of what's coming in the future, and what comes from this exploration of knowledge, and so it's dusted across the top that it's all creviced and really rough hewn, because again, they're not working with our modern technology, and yet when you cobble it all together, it's beautiful. And so all of it together makes this incredible, gorgeous combination that is a little rough around the edges, but in the middle of it is just a stunning surprise and a stunning beauty. So that is what I started being drawn to in the medieval soaps. And so I was looking at these saying, okay, the elements, I want to stick with the monophonic, with this idea of the single line, the single texture, which is why I went with the blue. But then adding the polyphony, adding this gold that's weaving its way through completely independently. Like the gold is not mixed into the blue whatsoever. And it's very independent and individual. So then I asked the question, okay, what does it smell like? Don't want to spend a whole lot of time thinking about what the medieval time period smells like, but I wanted to connect into the essence of this rough-hewn but still really solid feeling. And so I found a scent called Autumn Equinox, and it is on the bottom notes, it is oak and cinnamon. So you have these earth tones, you have these really grounding tones. And then in the middle is hay and beeswax and grassy herbal. And again, I was like, how does that work? Well, it works. It's incredible. And across the top is mint and chamomile. And so you wind up with this fragrance that is full-bodied and really, really rich. And when you smell it, it just envelops you because it's so earthy and so tangible. And yet it has this stately elegance. It's really the scent of someone who knows who they are. It's a maturity that is hard won. And it is so refreshing. It's been one of my favorite scents to kind of just have floating around as I've been working on putting this soap series together. I walk around and smell the soaps all the time. And so this is what I was looking for, is something that is new and fresh, finding these colors that are just starting to pop onto the scene during this time period. They're starting to make advances in art. They're starting to make advances in notating and history and all of these things that now we take for granted. This is where it starts, and so it's really exciting that this is the first of the soap series. And when I started this, I started taking aspects of this soap, right here, this little guy, and weaving it into the next ones, weaving in these ideas because they're all interrelated, and it's how do they relate to each other going forward. Thank you again. So this is Medieval Soap. I am MaryCatherine of the Cozy Crooked Cottage, and thanks for joining, and stay tuned because we are doing the first 5 compositional of the 6 compositional periods in music.